What is up, everybody? You are not hearing Todd Burrows. Normally, on a Thursday night, you would be hearing Todd Burrows to talk about betting and DFS. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us tonight, so I am filling in. My name is Raymond Summerlin. If you follow our YouTube account, you've now seen me twice on the YouTube channel in a day, and I feel very sorry for you. I apologize profusely for having to do that. By the way, if you don't follow our YouTube, you don't follow us live, this podcast, the Betting and DFS Preview, is done every single Thursday night at 7:15 Eastern. Go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notified for it. But I'm not Todd. I'm here. I'm going to try to do my best impression of him. And I'm back paired up with a man who I did several podcasts with, over under podcasts with in August. Some of those, Ryan, are going well. Some of them maybe not so well, but I'm excited to be back on the podcast with you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, excited to talk some more props with you today.
Yeah, Ryan writes about, and in addition to the over unders that we did in August, Ryan McCrystal writes about overs and unders every week at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Been doing very well on those throughout the year. So we're going to talk about those and talk about maybe some DFS getting into that as well. I do want to talk about a little bit of the August ones, though. It's funny, Alexander Madison. It's funny that the trade happened right before you and I talked, because that was the one. Alexander Madison was one of those that we talked about in August. Like, yeah, there's no way. I think we were like, maybe he makes it to week 6. He made it to week 3. So the under there is good. But the one I really want to talk about is Tyler Higbee, because when we talked about Tyler Higbee, we were like, well, Cooper Kupp is hurt. The receiving core, there's nobody there. And my goodness, were we wrong about that one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we weren't quite seeing Puka Nacua stepping up the way that he had. I mean, even I think among those of us here at Sharp Football, I think Todd was the highest on him, and there's no way he was predicting this
Not
kind of
even close.
breakout.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, no, how were we to know that Puka was created in a lab to just perfectly replicate Cooper Kupp's role in production? How are we to possibly know that? But yeah, it's been fun watching those. I've been every catch he makes, every catch that Higbee doesn't make, I think back to that conversation. So, we're gonna hit a few of those overs. Ryan's gonna hit all his overs, or most or a lot of his overs during the week. Last week on the site, our props package was amazing. Our props package went 13-5. So we're feeling generous. We want everybody to get involved in the action. We've come up with the promotion. You ever heard of penny for your thoughts? Well, how about a penny for your props? For this week only, you can get access to our props package for week 3 for just 1 cent. To learn more, go to sharpfootballanalysis.com. There's a blue bar at the top of the website. Click on that, and you will be able to find that offer. Take advantage of it. There's a ton of props. We have our Slack going. We just back and forth with props, talking about kind of what we like for the week. And so we've been doing really well, hoping to keep that going. Make sure you go and check that out at Sharp Football Analysis. Also, when I mentioned at the top, go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp, find our channel, and subscribe there. All right. Before we get into talking about the rest of the week, we got to talk about Thursday night. We're recording this on Thursday night. It's right about 7:20 Eastern time. We have some news coming out of the Thursday night game already, and that is that Brandon Ayuk is not going to play. I thought he had a chance to play, maybe, but he's not going to go out there. Maybe that's actually for the best, going up against the Giants, who we think the 49ers are going to be able to crush a little bit. So I know that you liked Ayuk and you kind of liked his totals a little bit. So now that he's out, Ryan, kind of where are you transitioning? How are you attacking this game from a maybe prop betting standpoint?
Yeah, I thought this was a good matchup for him against the Giants defense based on how the Giants tend to line up in coverage. But I'm still going to use the same logic that I would have used if he were out there to pivot to some other props. I don't love these two that I'm going to give out as much as I would have if Ayuk were out there. But if you are interested in just having some action on a Thursday night, I think that this is a pretty good way to go. Basically, it boils down to the fact that the Giants use single high coverage at one of the highest rates in the league. It's been 74% of the time so far this season. And if you look at the 49ers target share breakdown outside of the red zone, Ayuk saw a 27% target share in single high coverage last year, 19% against all other coverages. So he was really the biggest beneficiary really makes sense when you look at their other big weapons, right? Like he's the guy who's going to do best on the outside. When you're in single high coverage, much more likely to get that one-on-one opportunity on the outside. So they like going to him in those situations. Whereas Debo, he's more of the sort of all-purpose guy all over the field. And Kittle, obviously, he's benefiting more to when the middle of the field is open, which is not the case with single high coverage. So looking at the other receivers and how it breaks down, obviously we're not going to play Kittle against a single high team like this. You would be more likely to want to play the under. In fact, I'm not going to go there though, because of the fact that Ayuk is out, because that alone, that could also that could give Kittle a little bit of a boost. So I'm not going to play the under on him, but I do think you could play the over on Deebo Samuel, because I mentioned how Ayuk was seeing a 27% target share versus single high. Well, Deebo was seeing a 26% target share. So he's still seeing a good workload here. So I believe this was at 4.5 receptions last I checked. Not certain. It's possible it shifted in the last moments here now that we have certainty with Ayuk. But the other thing that you could play, a little more of a risk, but Juwan Jennings the over under on his receptions is 2.5. And he is also, well, we haven't seen him in this role a lot, he's certainly built like that big outside receiver. So I would think if they still want to attack the Giants in the same way, he's probably the beneficiary, the guy that they would want to go to in those one-on-one situations on the outside. So a little bit more of a risk there, but if you wanted to throw a little something on that, just if you're looking for some action tonight, I think that's a way you could go.
Yeah, and Jennings had 3 targets last week, and so we kind of saw when Ayuk was a little bit limited, we saw Jennings, his usage go up, and I think that makes a lot of sense. What I will say about Kittle, because I am actually playing Kittle in Showdown tonight. Part of that though is price. Kittle's price is probably lower than it should be, although I mean he's just, you look back at the last 16 games or whatever, and he's just been up and down, up and down, up and down, and so maybe that price probably makes some sense. But what I'll say is we didn't get a lot of time last year without Ayuk, but we did get some time without Deebo. So with one receiver, one of those starting receivers off the field, George Kittle's target share went from 14% with Deebo on the field last year to 23.5 without Deebo. Obviously, it's different roles, but I do think that kind of shows that if they're going to need Kittle to be more involved in the passing game, then at least, it's not a great matchup. It's not like the perfect setup for him. But if they just need him more involved in the pass game, maybe we get those targets. And the way Kittle is, that's really all you need, is you just need him to get targets. He hasn't been getting targets. He hasn't been even as involved as a route runner as you want. And so if we're going to see that, then there's at least some upside there. And that's why I am playing Kittle a little bit in Showdown. But I think you're right. Your reading of it is correct. This is not the perfect setup for him. One prop that I like, and this one has been bet up, unfortunately, since when I took it on Thursday morning, and that was Nick Bosa over 0.75 sacks. It was 0.25 this morning. I had no idea why. I know that Nick Bosa was limited when he came back in week 1, but his snaps spiked last week. He got 3 quarterback hits last week. I mean, Daniel Jones lives under pressure. The Giants, their offensive line is beat up. I mean, I would like it a lot better if it was still 0.25, because we could see a lot of group sacks in this game, and maybe he only ends up with a half sack, and then you're going to hit the under on 0.75. But I still like 0.75. I think that line maybe was set a little low, and they're not going to get it high enough. And so I would still take Nick Bosa there. But man, I really wish everybody could have got it. If we had recorded this at 8 a.m, I would have I'd have been a lot happier with that.
Yeah, definitely makes sense for Bosa. That's a good matchup for him. And with expecting a lot of dropbacks for Daniel Jones, certainly increases the odds. And going back briefly to what you were saying about Kittle, even though I'm not super high on Kittle as far as his reception total, I don't think you're wrong to want to target him in DFS, because without Ayuk, I was mostly focused on the full game picture, but obviously touchdowns matter a lot more for DFS, and they don't matter at all if we're just betting receptions. And so without Ayuk, that certainly increases the odds of him being the go-to guy in the red zone. So touchdown odds for him certainly get a boost now that we know for sure that Ayuk is out.
More on kind of the showdown before we get out of here. This is a really difficult showdown lineup. We were actually talking about that before we hit record. These kind of games where you expect one team to pretty much dominate is difficult. It's difficult to kind of figure out what to do, especially since they couldn't price Christian McCaffrey high enough. Christian McCaffrey is going to be in a lot of captain spots, even though they priced him way up. So it's interesting to try to, figure out what to do. What I will say is if you go over to sharpfootballanalysis.com right now, you can find Adam Wild's showdown article and kind of his breakdown of what he thinks, kind of some strategy and how he would attack this. For me, I think there's a couple things that I'm going to try to look for. First of all, Wan'Dale Robinson is playing. He's coming back from a serious injury, but he's been practicing for a couple of weeks and now he's finally active. He's only $200, so it's the stone minimum at DraftKings in the showdown. So that's worth taking a shot for me, and it frees up a lot of space for other salary. And if this goes to plan, if the 49ers really dominate this game, then you need to have a lot of 49ers in your lineup. And I wonder if, even though McCaffrey's going to be popular, even though Deebo Samuel's going to be popular, even though Brock Purdy's going to be popular, if you can get all four of the primary offensive weapons, including George Kittle with that trio, if you can get all of them into the same lineup with maybe Juwan Jennings, maybe you really go the full stack. You can't get 49ers defense in there, but you can get Jake Moody in there. I don't know if people are going to be willing to go the full, 5-1 setup for this game. And if you do, that might make you unique enough. And still, if the chalk hits, you're going to be in a good spot. So this is a tough slate. If I'm going to try to get unique, it's going to try to get unique by just stacking a whole bunch of 49ers and hoping for the best. So let's move on to the rest of the week. Thinking about the rest of the week, we're going to talk a lot about Ryan's props for this week. You can find his props article at sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'd really recommend you do. And the first one we have here is the over on Miles Sanders receptions. If you can get it at 4.5, right? Or 3.5, is that the number? So if you can get it at 3.5, Miles Sanders receptions over. Why do you like this? What do you like about this?
Yeah, this comes down. Well, I mean, I guess first off, he's off to a nice start. He's been involved in the passing game. So that through the first two games, that gives us a little bit of insight into how they want to use him this year, but also not enough of a sample size to probably shift the line for this too much. But then it's also a great matchup against the Seahawks because the Seahawks just simply don't blitz. Only a 15% blitz rate through two games, lowest rate in the NFL. And that's going to boost the likelihood of any running back getting involved in the passing game. League-wide numbers dating back to the start of last season, running backs see a 13% target share against the blitz, 20% target share when there is no blitz. So, really in any matchup, you're going to want to take a look at the running backs receptions when you have a team like the Seahawks who don't blitz. And this is true specifically for Frank Reich's offense. If you look back historically at him, his running backs without the blitz saw an increased usage consistently when he was with the Chargers as the offensive coordinator, also when he was with the Colts. And we've even seen it so far this year because all 11 of Miles Sanders' targets have come when the defense did not blitz. So we're already starting to see it sort of take shape. So this looks like a really good opportunity so long as this line doesn't jump up above 3.5.
Yeah, and I think, we got news on Thursday that Andy Dalton is going to start this game for the Panthers. I think, Dalton doesn't have like a great career target rate, two running backs. However, you would think that if the Seahawks don't normally blitz, they're certainly not blitzing the veteran Andy Dalton. Dalton actually ate up the blitz last year with the Saints. So you're not going to do that. So I think that might even help this line a little bit. The one little area of concern I would have is that we saw Chuba Hubbard as the third down back last week. He actually ran more fourth quarter routes than Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders, we're going back to his rookie year. His rookie year in Philadelphia, they gave him a shot as a receiver, and he did nothing with those catches. And now through 2 weeks, we're seeing the exact same thing. So I am a little bit worried, is this going to keep up for Miles Sanders? I'm worried about it for this prop. I'm worried about it for a lot of best ball teams because I thought Miles Sanders was a value because I did think he'd be used more in the passing game. And, well, it hasn't exactly worked out. He's been used, but it hasn't really worked out from a yardage standpoint. So that's really my one concern. But from a usage perspective, this, if you can get it at 3.5, I think that's probably a lot of Sanders' reputation and not kind of how he's been used so far this year in Carolina. So I do think that would be interesting. The next one you had was the Josh Jacobs longest rush. You would take the under at 10.5 yards or higher. I think I could guess why. I mean, a player coming off, 9 carries for -2 yards last week? Yeah, I think I could see why you might take the under on longest rush 10.5.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders' offensive line has just been a sieve. I mean, they've just been got probably the worst unit in the league so far in the run game. At least he has absolutely no room to run, and if this continues, there's just very, very slim odds of him breaking off a run of really 10 yards or longer. He's averaging negative 0.3 yards before contact per carry. So
Yeah.
on average, he's getting contacted in the backfield. That's unheard of. I mean, in a small sample size, obviously it can happen, but I mean, even 2 games into the season for a good running back like Jacobs to be putting up that kind of number. I mean, we've seen enough of Jacobs over the past few years now to know this is not his fault. It usually is an offensive line stat. And when you have a historically productive running back like Jacobs, producing like this, of course, we can say it's an offensive line stat. And he's had 3 or more yards before contact on 0 carries all year. I mean, if you've listened to this podcast over the years, I mentioned that stat a lot, but runs of 15 or more yards from running backs, they start with 3 or more yards before contact 79% of the time. So to get a long run, to get you the type of run that's going to hit you an over on a longest rush prop, it almost always has to start with a good chunk of untouched yardage. And we literally have not seen Jacobs get that yet through 2 games. So I'm going to hopefully we win. And if we win again this week and the line looks the same, I'm going to keep playing it. This could definitely be one that we ride out for a few weeks here.
And I mean, you would say, okay, the matchup's good though. You based on what we've seen from the Steelers defense, at least they gave up a long run to Jerome Ford even after Nick Chubb went out. But the matchup was good in week 1, and we saw what Brian Robinson did to the Broncos defense in week 2, and Josh Jacobs wasn't able to do that. We saw what Breece Hall was able to do to the Bills defense in week 1. Week 2, Jacobs can't even gain positive yardage. So, I mean, the matchups haven't been there. And it's funny you mentioned the offensive line. I was actually looking at this today because I find it very interesting that they've been so bad in the run game, but they've been really good in the pass game. Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe, is the least pressured quarterback through 2 weeks. And I was looking up ESPN's numbers. ESPN's their pass block win rate has them at 74%, which is second in the league, the Raiders offensive line. And I like this stat because, like you mentioned, yards before contact is an offensive line stat, but it's also a running back stat as well. Yeah. I think you're right, though, that if you have a history with a player, you can start to assign blame. And if you just watch the game, you can start to assign blame. And I think you're right that this is an offensive line issue. And ESPN's run block win rate agrees as well. They have them at 68%, which is 24th in the league. And so yeah, this is a line problem. And it has been odd. What I will say about Jacobs is his yards after contact per attempt is 1.93 after it was 3.4 last year. Maybe that's just a case of it's harder to create yards if you're getting hit in the backfield. You don't have as much momentum. And so, we'll see kind of where that goes. The one little interesting thing is it was garbage time, but Zamir White came in at the end of that game last week, and very quickly gained 22 yards on 4 carries. So that's something to file away, at least for moving forward in kind of this situation, especially given the maybe a little bit of animosity there might be contract wise between Josh Jacobs and the Raiders.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. I mean, we said that this was an offensive line thing, but you're right. Maybe some stuff went on in the offseason. Maybe as the season goes on, we start to realize it's a little bit of a Josh Jacobs issue also.
Yeah, I'm very interested in kind of seeing how that goes. The next one up on the list here is Sam Howell. You like his over on completions. If it's 22.5 or lower, you're going to take the over. And I just have to say, kind of straight out of the gun, he was really good last week. And I know they came back against Denver. I don't know how many people were watching that game, but he was legitimately good in the second half of that game. 88.9% completion rate, 13.4 yards per attempt. His touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin was a great pass. And I mean, week 2, that's his 3rd start. We saw that, that level of improvement. I know you have some specific kind of Bills related reasons for why you like Hal here. And I'm going to love to hear them, but I also kind of think that what if Sam Howell's just good? It's going to be kind of an interesting thing to watch this week and moving forward, I think, as their schedule gets a little bit tougher.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my reason is mostly about the Bills defense, but it certainly adds to the confidence having seen how he's played. I mean, if nothing else, he is clearly playing with confidence right now. This is not the moment is not too big for him. He certainly knows what the game plan is and he's executing it. Whether he can sustain it long term, who knows? But for this, at least this week, going into this prop, that does boost my confidence, seeing how he closed out last week. But yeah, I'm going to be on the over on his completions. Haven't seen the line for this yet, but I'd like it at 22 completions or lower. And I'm guessing that it will be lower than that. I saw that for some reason Allen's was posted for this game already, but not Howell's, and Allen's was at 21 and a half. And I would imagine his is going to be listed at higher than Howell's. So we could get a pretty nice number if it's down like 18 or 19. I'd be pretty excited about that. That could end up being my favorite prop of the week if the number is that low. Although I will say before I dive into the full reasoning, keep an eye on the weather for this game because it is potential to get hit with a storm. And obviously with, playing a passing prop, that could affect things. So wait until sort of the last minute to get in, or at least until we have a better idea of what the weather will be like. But anyways, my reason here is the Bills defense. What they've tended to do over the years, especially when they're healthy in recent years, is they like to just drop everybody in zone coverage, just send 4 pass rushers and just say, you can try to dink and dunk on us, but we trust our guys to, limit yards after the catch, and we'll do a little bit of a bend but don't break thing. And so when we can correctly anticipate that, which, it does depend on them being healthy, and Micah Hyde is potentially banged up. So that's another reason to maybe wait and see with this prop. But assuming he's healthy, which it sounds like he does have a chance to play at least, they're going to take this approach, certainly against a team like the Commanders, that they are not really concerned about letting them up all over the place. That they're going to take this bend but don't break approach on defense, and that should allow Howell to just sort of dink and dunk his way throughout the whole game. And it wouldn't shock me if he ends up with something like 30 completions on 40 attempts while averaging 6 yards per attempt or something like that. That we've definitely seen quarterbacks put up that type of line against the Bills. And just, one more thing to add to this, Howell, when he has faced zone coverage with no blitz this season, 77% completion rate. So he's handling that situation well. All other coverage schemes, only 48%. So he's having some issues if you start to toy with him a little bit and show him some more complex looks. But we don't think he's going to see that. So this looks like a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, and kind of what you're talking about also, you think about from a DFS perspective, what you might be interested in. It doesn't seem like Logan Thomas is going to play. You're going to be able to get some cheap tight ends in Washington. I mean, Cole Turner is who was ahead in the preseason. We saw John Bates play ahead last week, so there might be some kind of cheap, if you're trying to pay up for a running backs and pay up for quarterback, then maybe you can get a little cute with the Washington tight ends. So just something to think about and to look at. Next up is my favorite prop. I am 100% in on this one. You have Kirk Cousins, the longest completion. You're going to take the over on 38.5 yards or lower. I mean, I'm in on this one. The Chargers gave up 2 20-plus yard completions to Ryan Tannehill last week, which I did not know was possible. I did not know that was even allowed in the NFL. I love this. I'm way in. Tell us why.
Yeah, well, I do have to preface it by saying that I did see this line posted in one spot over at DraftKings, and it was at 40.5. So maybe the line gets inflated a little too much because we're not the only ones onto this trend with the Chargers. But it's still worth talking about because it could be available lower elsewhere. And even at 40.5, I'm not automatically going to say don't play it at that number. That's still a very reasonable, and I can get into some of the reasons why. But like you said, the Chargers, they're just giving up big plays left and right now. Tannehill, you mentioned he gave up 2 20-yard plays, but he only threw 15 or more yards downfield 4 times last week, but he was 3 of 4 on those plays. I mean, you can't be allowing Tannehill to do that to you. And obviously week 1, Tua lit him up downfield. They've allowed a league high 12 receptions at 15 or more yards downfield. Cousins doesn't throw downfield at a super high rate, but he's right around the league average. He's definitely going to take his shots downfield. And, going all the way back to last year, he's had a 40-yard completion or longer in 11 of 19 games. So a pretty good trend of getting into the 40s. So with it being at 40.5, I do think that it's reasonable to still play. That's when a line goes slightly above what I was hoping at, oftentimes I'll still play it, but I'll just put a little bit less on it. So that would be my recommendation if 40 ends up being the best number that we can get. It's still worth playing at a slightly, just put a little bit less on it, risk a little bit less. But I think that you can also play this prop in conjunction with the over on Addison and Jefferson's longest receptions. And those were also posted. Jefferson's at 30.5, Addison's at 22.5. And so I like Addison a little bit more. The two of them have seen all of Cousins' targets at 20 or more yards downfield this season, 4 apiece, actually. So they're both getting opportunities and a pretty significant difference in the line that you're getting with those. So I prefer Addison, but I think it's totally reasonable to play all 3 of these. And almost like a worst case scenario, you're probably going to hit 2 of them. I think there's a really good chance you hit Cousins and at least one of the receivers. So it's all around. This looks like a great matchup for these props.
The other thing I'll say about the Addison one, because I really like that one a lot. I didn't know that it was came in that low. The other thing I'll say about Addison is that I've been at least a little bit disappointed by his drop back rate or his route participation and their throws. He's been playing behind Osborne. We saw Osborne catch a touchdown last Thursday, but we saw him make a couple drops. You're going to think that Addison is going to start to get more and more involved. So if he's even more involved, he's running even more routes. We've seen them get him down the field now twice, 2 games in a row. We've seen him make big plays down the field. And like you said, even on a more limited route share, he is tied with Justin Jefferson for targets, down the field. And the other thing you said, about Cousins has been 20 or yards more down the field, throws of 20 or more yards. He's 4th in EPA per drop back, and he has an off-target rate of 0, according to True Media. He's been on target for all of those throws. So it's, he's been really operating well down there. I will say, I talked a little bit about this when talking about this game with Rich Rebar on the fantasy preview, and he threw a little bit of cold water on it, thinking that maybe the Chargers, based on kind of what happened in Miami and based on what happened in Tennessee, maybe they drop back, they play a little more zone, they play a little bit deeper, and they try to just keep everything in front of them, which that's the way that NFL defenses play defense now. But what I said to that, and what I think is that what we saw last week and what we saw a lot of times in Miami wasn't, it wasn't that the defense was, selling all out for the blitz. They just, JC Jackson, I don't know what happened to him, but, I don't know if he's still hurt, but they just got beat. And so I think that is a concern. I think Rich's concern is valid, but I do think that this might just be a fatal flaw of this defense just moving forward based on their personnel.
Yeah. And I would say that as a concern, that would worry me a little bit more from a fantasy perspective where you're more concerned with volume. But for a prop like this, where we just need one busted coverage, we're seeing that consistently, like you mentioned. So yeah, we don't need them to take I think Tua threw, 15 or more yards on field, like 15 times or something like that. We don't need Cousins to do that. We just need, a couple busted coverages and he hits downfield, and maybe we can win all 3 of those props.
So I was thinking about, if we really needed to talk about this last one, could we is there a way, producer Sean, for us just to press play from the first 2 weeks, you talking about TJ Hockenson and trying to take the overs? You would say you take the over on 4.5 receptions or lower. I actually haven't seen if this one's posted anywhere. So let's lay into it. We're just taking this every week. It has been posted. Is it good or bad?
Unfortunately, it has. And like the Cousins one, it climbed a little higher. I've only seen it at DraftKings. It's at 5.5, and that's the highest it's been since Hockenson got to Minnesota. So it seems like they finally caught on to this trend that we've capitalized on the first 2 weeks this year. But I'm still going to play it similar to the Cousins one. I'll just put a little bit less on it. But even at 5.5, he's gone over that, and he's had 6 or more receptions in 8 of his 12 full games with the Vikings. I'm throwing out the one game, week 18 last year, where he only played less than half of the game. So throwing that one out, 8 of his 12 full games, he's had 6 or more receptions. So it's perfectly reasonable to still play that. It just, because of that trend, that's why we were feeling so confident in the 4.5, right? Because he was consistently getting 2 more receptions than the line was. So that gave us a ton of confidence. Lower confidence level, but still totally worth playing. As I said, we're 2-0 playing this prop so far this year, and it's 9-2. The over is 9-2 since he got to Minnesota. So this has been a really consistent one. It seems to be matchup proof also. Obviously, he's consistently winning against all kinds of defense, but we've also got a pretty good matchup here with the Chargers using 2 high safeties at a 47% rate outside the red zone. That's above the league average. As we talked about, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but we had a similar matchup for Hockenson. It opens up the middle of the field, and that's where he sees 62% of his targets. So they want to throw to him in the middle of the field. When you have a team like the Chargers giving you the type of coverage that opens that up, it's even more obvious play with Hockenson in this situation. So, disappointed to see it rise because that has to lower our confidence a little bit, but it's still totally justified to take the over here.
I mean, the Chargers defense, they actually last year, I believe they gave up with the fourth fewest receptions to tight ends last year or something like that. But then then week 1, they gave up 7 targets to Durham Smythe of all people. And so, we'll see kind of where this goes with the Chargers defense. I do think that this feels like, I mean, maybe Addison takes on a larger target share. And that was one of the concerns with Hockenson in fantasy, was that he was living on volume. His per target efficiency wasn't kind of where you wanted it to be for a high end tight end one, but he was living on volume. Maybe Addison kind of cuts into that at some point, but this feels like the kind of bet that you just take the over until either they make it high enough or he gives you a reason not to. Like it is really one of those kind, because he is just that involved in the passing game. And that's, at a tight end that involved in the passing game, you love it. You love to see it. In the fantasy wasteland of tight end. I don't know how closely you're paying attention to fantasy this year, but tight end, it's a disaster zone, right?
Yeah. Well, and also the fact that he's sort of frustrating from a fantasy perspective a little bit, because he just sort of sees a lot of junk targets, that almost makes it even better for attacking this prop, because those are always going to be there. Cousins is always going to need to just check down and throw, 4 yards to Hockenson. That's always going to be available in every matchup. So it just adds to our confidence in this one.
Yeah, no, it's set up very well. Like I said, I think you just keep taking this one until you find a reason not to. All right, let's move on and talk a little bit about the DFS weekend. This is a really early preview. We record this on Thursday night. I probably won't start building my DFS lineups until Saturday. We want to see the final injury reports, but I do have some thoughts. I do have some interesting situations to talk about. And the first one is the Ravens and the Colts, which I think could be a bit of a sneaky stacking spot. Even with Anthony Richardson, it seems like he's going to be out. He missed practice on Thursday too. We'll see where that goes. But Gardner Minshew came in last week and was able to run the offense. And what I think is interesting about the Colts is, this total is 45. It's the 5th highest on the main slate, on the Sunday slate. So it's not, particularly high. I don't think people are going to really be looking at it. But the over is currently 2-0 in games with the Colts. And one of the reasons for that is that the Colts have actually been playing at a pretty high pace. They're second in first half pace, which is, I like to look at only the first half to see how teams really want to set out and play. And they've been trying to play fast. Their drop back rate last week, even in a highly positive game script, their drop back rate was 62.5%. And so I look at this situation and I think that A, this is a game that might be interesting to hit the over, and B, it seems like this could go a little bit overlooked from a fantasy perspective. So what do you think about this game? What are you kind of looking at?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think sometimes in DFS, there's value in finding one of these situations where there's a significant change to the offense, a significant injury. It often doesn't have the catastrophic effect that we might think. And I think this could be especially true because we got to assume they hadn't really built the full offense around Anthony Richardson, and they had to have dialed it back quite a bit. It might actually be able to open things up a little bit with Minshew, just because they can trust him a little bit more to handle a larger percentage of the playbook. It might even make the offense look a little bit better. Obviously, it's going to look different because Richardson's scrambling ability was a big part of what was working for them. But we could potentially see some of the wealth spread around on the Colts offense a little bit, and they might not suffer as much as you might think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about this matchup, and the reason I like it, is because this Colts defense is one that we're just going to want to attack in the passing game just all year long. Like, it looks like one that we are going to want to play quarterbacks and wide receivers and tight ends against the Colts, especially if they're going to keep this high pace. which you would expect. That's what we saw in Philadelphia with Shane Steichen. And so you're going to expect that we'd see this high pace. And their defense, they're going to get thrown on. They were thrown on by CJ Stroud last week. They were thrown on by Trevor Lawrence in week 1. The Colts defense has allowed 7.9 yards per pass attempt, a 5.1% touchdown rate. And this is a stat. I actually got this stat from the worksheet, which you can find at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Rich Rebar's fantasy preview of every single game of the week. Go and check those out. Those are amazing. And so I got this from the worksheet. It said through 2 games, the Colts have allowed 4 top 20 scoring wide receivers. So 2 games, 4 top 20 scoring wide receivers. That's the kind of volume you're looking for. And then the other thing out of this game is that it's kind of easy to stack the Ravens now. Odell Beckham is going to be out, most likely. It seems like that's where he's trending. So you can pay for Lamar, you can pay for Mark Andrews, and then you can go and get Zay Flowers, who for some reason at DraftKings is still only $5,400. I don't understand it, but he's still at a full PPR site. He's still only $5,400 in salary. You can go and get him. And then on the bring back, Michael Pittman's going to get a ton of targets. You'll be able to get him. And then, Josh Downs was targeted on 18.2% of Minshew's throws last week. So if Minshew is going to be in there, you might get a lot of targets to Josh Downs, who profiles as the kind of wide receiver is going to be better in PPR than not, and he's only 3,500. And so I think stacking this game is easy. I think it fits. I think you can get a lot of the other pieces you're interested in it. And I don't know how popular Lamar's going to be popular because he's Lamar. Mark Andrews is going to be popular because he's Mark Andrews. But the rest of it, I'm not sure how popular they're going to be. And I think you could get a little bit of a unique stack going. The other thing that I'm really interested in this week is running backs that maybe we're not always interested in because they're not as involved in the passing game, on big favorites who might have game script working in their favor. And top of my list, and there are a lot of them this week. Tony Pollard's not at home, but he's a giant favorite, and we saw last week they're going to give him a lot of touches. Travis Etienne is a big favorite at home. Isaiah Pacheco, who I actually talked with Rich on the podcast, and you're going to know more about this because you pay so much more attention to college. Is it possible we're saying Isaiah Pacheco's name wrong? Has anybody ever asked him if it should be
that is how I have always heard it, but it's certainly possible. It's happened to us before.
Like, it's spelled Isaiah, and I know Isaiahs. Like, Isaiah is a name. I know many Isaiahs. I might tweet at him. Are we all saying your name wrong?
Go for it.
And then the other one that's in this situation is Raheem Mostert. So there's a lot of them. My favorite of that group is Kenneth Walker. I'm big on him this week because through 2 weeks, kind of what we were worried about from a workload perspective has not shown up. Even though they drafted Zach Charbonnet in the second round, we have not seen those workload concerns show up. He has 34 of 47 backfield touches, 29 of 39 running back carries, 31 of 55 running back routes. He has been the workhorse. And if he's going to be the workhorse in this game against Andy Dalton starting, against the Panthers, who haven't been able to move the ball, even with Bryce Young in there, their wide receivers, aren't getting open. The Seahawks defense hasn't been great, but I think they're going to be able to handle the Panthers defense. They're going to be able to run if they want to. I am way in on Kenneth Walker this week, and his price really hasn't gotten high enough for me to be off it. He might be popular. I assume he will be popular coming off 2 touchdowns last week, but I kind of don't care. I think I'm just going to eat the chalk and take Kenneth Walker because I really like this spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. It looks like it could be a good matchup for him against the Panthers defense, which we thought was going to be decent at least this year. But in the run game so far, they're allowing 1.7 yards before contact per carry. So that's sort of, if that's real, if that's just not like a little early season blip, that's really good for a running back like Kenneth Walker, who I've been sort of down on from a big picture perspective because he's one of those guys that just dances in the backfield and it can just kill you so much when he just takes way too many negative plays in the run game. But going up against a defense like this, that it seems like it might be an issue for them getting into the backfield. That's certainly that should increase his odds of, crossing the line of scrimmage, but then opens the door for some big plays for him.
Yeah. And you mentioned it, like the boomer bust is still here. Like nothing has changed from that perspective. I think, 27.6% of his runs have been 0 yards or negative, and that is that is who Kenneth Walker is. Like that is who he is as a player, and that is always going to be the case. I remember we talked after the draft that might have been one of the reasons why they were interested in Zach Charbonnet, is because Zach Charbonnet is a different running back. But even so, we have not seen that switch happen. We have not seen Charbonnet start getting that work. And so I'm in on Kenneth Walker. Another running back I'm in on is kind of a post-hype way is Joshua Kelley. And what's interesting is that everybody, gets excited about Joshua Kelley last week because Eckler's not there. He coming off the big game. They were playing the Titans. The Chargers were playing the Titans. You know who's playing the Titans this week? The Cleveland Browns. You know who everybody's excited about because Nick Chubb got hurt and they think he's going to get a lot of carries? Jerome Ford. Be wary of Jerome Ford. I'm just telling you, the Titans are going to be rough. Well, this is now 3 weeks in a row. Jamal Williams in week 1. This is the DFS. Oh, look at the value. Look at the price. They're playing the Titans. The Titans are legit run defense. Be wary of Ford. However, I think that Josh Kelley could be interesting in a post-hype situation. It seems like Austin Eckler is still going to be out. I mean, I guess we haven't gotten full not commitment. Well, I don't want to say commitment, confirmation. There we go. Haven't gotten full confirmation on that. And the other thing is this is just a much better situation against the Vikings. The Vikings have given up 4.8 yards per carry to running backs, which is 7th worst. We saw the Eagles just absolutely run all over them last week. And so this is a good situation. People might be a little gun shy with him after last week. And I think he might not be on as many rosters as he probably should be given his price and his likely workload.
Yeah, totally with you on this. I cautioned against him last week because in that week 1 game where everyone got all excited, he was not contacted in the backfield on any of his carries. So of course he looked great.
I'm gonna guess that changed. I'm gonna guess that changed against the Titans. Are you gonna tell me that changed?
I didn't look up the exact number, but I'm positive it changed because the Titans contact running backs in the backfield over 50% of the time, both this year and last year. So of course it changed, and we all should have seen it coming. It was a terrible matchup for him, especially for someone who's been around the league a while and had some opportunities and hasn't looked like anything special whatsoever. And he's also kind of he's a between the tackles type of runner, much more so than Eckler is. And so he needs a little bit of help from his offensive line. He's not he's not a guy who's going to make a ton of people miss if he's getting contact in the backfield. But yeah, the Vikings defense is a much more favorable situation for him. It's probably not going to repeat what they did in week 1 when they were able to completely avoid contact in the backfield, but it's also now the Titans defense. So it's a much better situation for him. And you gotta love the fact that it's coming off a week where he disappointed a lot of people.
I think you need to just say Titans defense again so we prevent people from making the Jerome Ford mistake this week that they made with Joshua Kelley. I mean, maybe it hits. Maybe he gets a long run. He got a long run last week. But outside of that long run, Jerome Ford had 37 yards on 15 carries or something like that.
He looks terrible. Let's just call it what it is.
And this is one of those, we talked about it a little earlier. This is where yards before contact can be a running back stat. This year, yards before contact for Nick Chubb, this is all off the top of my head. I believe yards before contact Nick Chubb is 2.04 or something like that. Yep. And the yards before contact for Jerome Ford is like 0.3. And so that's an example of it can be a running back stat. And so it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's not like Kareem Hunt coming in is going to improve that either. So after what we saw last year, the running game for the Browns might not be it, but that actually brings me to the last thing I want to talk about, and that is the Browns passing game. If you're talking about the Titans defense, you talk about the run defense because their run defense is outstanding and their pass defense isn't. They are the perfect example of what a pass funnel defense is for fantasy football purposes. They are going to funnel more to the pass because you can't run against them and you can have a lot of success throwing. The problem is that we have absolutely no faith in this Browns passing attack and what we've seen from DeSean Watson coming off that Monday night game, everybody watching what happened in the second half of that game and then just completely falling apart. I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones just doesn't get targeted anymore. He's an 8.6% a target rate on his routes. Elijah Moore is not catching anything. Amari Cooper is the only one that's even producing anything, and even his efficiency numbers aren't great. DeSean Watson's not playing well. It's kind of ugly for the Browns, but that kind of makes it a good situation for DFS, especially if you're playing in tournaments. This is a great matchup against the Titans. The Titans have given up 4 top 24 wide receivers and 3 top 12, including the wide receiver 1 last week, Keenan Allen, through 2 games. They are going to be thrown on. If DeSean Watson can even get it close to his receivers, they're going to be good. And this is kind of one of those, do we think DeSean Watson is going to play well? I don't know. Do we think the Browns offense is going to play well? I don't know. But this is like a hold your nose, stack the Browns, and hope for the best.
Completely makes sense as sort of a contrarian play that there's some reason, because of the Titans defense, there's reason to think it could hit. But man, does DeSean Watson look bad. I didn't have too many negative things to say about his play on the field last year because it kind of made sense, right? Like he was away from football for a long time, and quarterback is a hard position. I don't think that I wasn't shocked that it didn't go smoothly once he jumped in, especially because of the way he had to like not totally be with the team and then jump in late in the season. It kind of made sense. But at this point, you got to play some last year. You got to be there for the whole offseason, and he looks terrible. Even in his completions, almost every throw is just kind of off target. And that can really kill you. I mean, obviously this is like a game of margins. And if you're slightly off target to Amari Cooper, you ruin his ability to do some damage after the catch. And man, he looks really bad. So yeah, I'm with you as far as this being like a good, logical kind of contrarian play because they're not going to be rostered a lot. But if he comes out and looks terrible against the Titans and they can't get anything going, run game or passing game, that's not going to surprise me either.
They can't get the passing game going against the Titans. That's a sign. And you mentioned his inaccuracy. His off-target rate, according to True Media, is 18.8% so far. The average in the NFL is 10.6%. It has not been good. It has definitely been a rough go. So if we're looking at this week as kind of this is make or break. What I will say, they probably need to get David Njoku a little bit more involved because if you just go through and look at kind of where the efficiency is, it's really bad to Donovan Peoples-Jones. It's really bad to Elijah Moore. It's kind of okay to Amari Cooper, and it's kind of okay to David Njoku. And so I wonder if that's a change they can make moving forward. Because, I mean, without Nick Chubb, Watson has to do it, and I don't know, man. I just don't.
It's going to change the way defenses approach him too. And he looked bad with Nick Chubb out there. And now if teams don't feel the need to sell to stop the run, it's not getting easier. Yeah.
So treat the Browns stack this week like you would a kale smoothie. Just plug your nose, drink it down, and hope for the best. Although I suppose I could be revealing about myself how much I hate vegetables. I guess if you look at me, you could probably guess that. But man, I don't like them. So yeah, we plug the nose. They go down. Have you ever had kale, Ryan?
Oh yeah, I actually like kale. I am team kale. But in a smoothie, I don't know about that. A mint spinach smoothie is pretty good, but I don't know if kale would work in that.
I can do the one I can do is banana because banana takes everything out. A banana spinach. I've always been I've been a fan of that. Banana spinach. That's
throw some mint in there.
That's not what we're here. Oh yeah. I haven't thrown mint in. I am now very interested. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. That's not what anybody cares about. We're done. We're finished talking about betting and DFS. Thank you for joining us tonight. Remember, if you're listening to this as a podcast, we do this betting and DFS preview. Normally it's with Todd Burrows instead of me. We do this every single Thursday night at 7:15 leading up to Thursday Night Football. Come and check us out on YouTube. Search Warren Sharp, and you will find our channel on YouTube. Subscribe, and you will get notified when we go live. Also, if you're checking out the website, go to Sharp Football Analysis. We were awesome on our props last week. We want to allow everybody to kind of see how we're doing. And so we're giving our props package away for just 1 week for 1 cent. That's all it costs. You can go and check it out. sharpfootballanalysis.com. Click the blue bar at the top. I'll be back to talk with you on Sunday after the Sunday game, 7:30. I'll be here with Tucker Bagley and Curtis Hirsch to recap all of the action. And then we move on. Good luck this week. Stay tuned to the podcast channel. He's Ryan. I'm Ray. We'll talk to you all soon.